Jack Elam really hated him more than anyone else. Jack Elam was born William Scott Elam on November 13, 1920 in Miami, Arizona. He was one of Hollywood's most famous actors that people always remembered. From when he was little, Elam loved telling stories and acting. These things helped him have a long and amazing career making movies and TV shows. After he served in the United States Navy during World War II, where he learned to be tough and never give up, he decided to become an actor. He went to school at the University of Southern California to learn acting. Elam looked different because one of his eyes didn't look straight, which made him stand out in Hollywood. Instead of thinking this was bad, he used it to make himself special. It made him look scary or weird on screen, and that became what he was known for. Elam worked as an actor for more than 50 years. During that time, he was in more than 200 movies and TV shows. He became really famous for acting in Western movies. These were movies about cowboys and the Old West that seemed perfect for his rough, different look and strong presence on screen. Movies like Once Upon a Time in the West in 1968, Support Your Local Sheriff in 1969, and The Night of the Grizzly in 1966 made everyone know him as the perfect bad guy. Even though Elam usually played mean characters, he also made them funny sometimes. People didn't just like watching him be the villain. They also liked how he sometimes made his characters seem human and real, which made him someone you never forgot in every story he was in. Besides Western movies, Jack Elam was really good at playing different kinds of characters. He could easily switch between funny movies, serious movies, and even movies for families. This proved that he could do more than just play one type of character. When he worked with other famous actors and directors, it showed how professional he was and how much people in the movie business respected him. Elam was also in lots of TV shows, including Gunsmoke, Bonanza, The Twilight Zone, and The Lone Ranger. These shows made him a big part of American TV culture. From 1974 to 1975, Jack Elam played a character named Zach Wheeler in The Texas Wheelers. This was a funny TV show that didn't last very long, but people remembered it. It was on ABC. In this show, Elam played a rough dad who suddenly came back into his kids' lives after their mom died. The story was about how Zach tried to raise 4 kids he barely knew, which was pretty unusual. This gave Elam a chance to show he could be funny and also play a character who, even though he had problems, actually had a good heart. Even though the show only had 8 episodes, it was special because Elam worked with future stars like Mark Hamill, who later became famous as Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, and Gary Busey. Even though The Texas Wheelers didn't get good ratings and got canceled quickly, critics liked Elam's acting. They said his rough personality and weird screen presence made the family comedy show more interesting. Elam kept trying unusual roles on TV, showing he was willing to play different types of characters instead of just the tough Western and bad guy roles he was known for. In 1979, he was in a CBS comedy show called Struck by Lightning. He played Frankenstein's monster, which was really unexpected. This weird comedy was about a scientist who finds out his relative was Dr. Frankenstein. Through funny events, he ends up living with the monster. Elam, with his special facial features and strange charm, was perfect for such a weird role. He mixed humor with the silliness of playing a famous scary character in a light-hearted comedy show. Unfortunately, the show never found enough viewers and got canceled after just 3 episodes. The other 8 episodes never showed in the United States. Interestingly, all 11 episodes eventually played in the United Kingdom in 1980. This gave British viewers a chance to see Elam's unusual comedy acting, which is still something strange and interesting in his long career. Even in the 1990s, Elam kept making appearances that showed how many different types of characters he could play. He played Hick Peterson in a first-season episode of the very popular comedy show Home Improvement. The episode was called Birds of a Feather Flock to Taylor, which was Season 1, Episode 20. This gave Elam the chance to act with another Hollywood legend, Ernest Borgnine. The story was about weird characters and their funny interactions with Tim Allen's Taylor family. Elam's acting reminded viewers that he was still really good at being funny. For people who remembered him as a scary outlaw in Western movies, seeing Elam make people laugh on a modern family comedy show proved just how many different types of characters he could really play. In movies, Elam made his reputation for weird comedy even stronger with his role as Dr. Nicholas Van Helsing, who called himself a crazy proctologist in the 1981 action comedy hit, The Cannonball Run. The movie was directed by Hal Needham and had an all-star cast that included Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, and Farrah Fawcett. It was a wild cross-country car race filled with silly humor and crazy characters. Elam's performance as the Weird Doctor was one of the movie's strangest and best parts. It showed his gift for turning even the smallest role into something people would remember. People liked his acting so much that Elam played the role again 3 years later in the sequel Cannonball Run 2 in 1984. Once again, he made audiences happy with his wild-eyed silly acting and unpredictable comedy. In 1986, Elam was in The Aurora Encounter, a movie often called a weird western because it mixed western themes with science fiction in an unusual way. In this movie, Elam played Charlie Hawkins, a town drunk whose weird behavior added to the movie's strange tone. It was while making this movie that Elam had one of the most meaningful personal connections of his life. On the movie set, he met Mickey Hayes, an 11-year-old boy from Texas who had progeria, a rare condition that makes people age very fast. Even though they were very different in age and life situations, Elam and Hayes became really close friends. Their friendship was later shown in the 1987 movie I Am Not a Freak, which showed how much the two cared about each other. It also showed how Elam's warmth and kindness showed just as much off-screen as his charm did on screen. Elam once said in what might be a made-up but often repeated quote, "You know, I've met a lot of people, but I've never met anybody that got next to me like Mickey." This friendship showed a gentle and caring side of Elam that audiences rarely saw in his tough guy roles. That same year, Elam added to his TV work again by co-starring in the comedy series Easy Street. He played Alvin Bully Stevenson, the unlucky uncle of Lonnie Anderson's character L.K. McGuire. The show was about an unlikely living situation where a wealthy socialite played by Anderson shares her fancy home with her working-class relatives, creating lots of funny conflict. Elam's character, with his clumsy but lovable qualities, was a natural source of humor. Even though Easy Street didn't last long, Elam's presence helped make the sitcom better. His pairing with Anderson gave audiences a fun mix of Hollywood glamour and rough-edged charm. In 1988, Elam teamed up with country music legend Willie Nelson in the made-for-TV Western movie Where the Hell's That Gold? The movie, which also starred Delta Burke, was a funny Western adventure involving a treasure hunt, double-crosses, and bigger-than-life characters. Elam's role let him go back to familiar Western territory, but with a funny twist that had become one of his trademarks. His chemistry with Nelson added to the movie's appeal, as both men brought a relaxed, easygoing energy to their acting. Elam's long and amazing career got official recognition in 1994 when he was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. This honor put him alongside some of the most respected names in the history of Western movies and TV shows. The induction was a perfect tribute to an actor who had not only made himself famous through unforgettable villainous and comic performances, but had also contributed to the lasting legacy of the Western genre. For fans and colleagues alike, Elam's recognition in the Hall of Great Western Performers proved his versatility, longevity, and the permanent mark he left on American entertainment. When people think of Jack Elam, they often remember his signature lazy eye, his weathered face, and his ability to steal almost any scene he was in, whether as a villain in a Western or as a funny old-timer later in his career. But behind the scenes, Elam was known as a man who said what he thought without holding back. He had strong opinions about almost everyone he ever worked with. And one actor who especially bothered him was none other than Gary Cooper, the legendary star of classic Hollywood westerns and dramas. Gary Cooper was celebrated as one of the greatest screen icons of his time. He was famous for his quiet dignity, his understated style, and his ability to show strength with just a few words. To many, he was exactly what a Western hero should be. But to Jack Elam, Cooper represented almost everything he disliked about Hollywood's golden age leading men. Elam believed that Cooper had been overrated and that his so-called natural acting was little more than, as Elam once said, standing around and mumbling while everyone else did the work. Elam would often tell stories in interviews or on movie sets about his not-so-great experiences with Cooper. "Gary Cooper never impressed me," Elam reportedly said. "He was always just there. You'd have these great character actors carrying a scene, giving everything they had, and Cooper would just mutter a line in that low voice of his, and the critics would call it brilliant. I never saw brilliance. I saw a guy who got by on looking good in a cowboy hat." Part of Elam's dislike came from what he thought was Cooper's lack of hard work. While Elam himself worked really hard to perfect even small roles, often showing up on set early and staying late to practice his lines, he claimed that Cooper just coasted on his star power. "If you asked me who I thought was lazy, I'd say Gary Cooper without blinking," Elam once said. He didn't rehearse. He didn't push himself. He didn't care if the scene sparkled. He just wanted to get through it and collect the paycheck. Meanwhile, the rest of us were sweating blood trying to make it all work. Elam also had strong feelings about the way Cooper treated others on set. While Cooper had a reputation among many as polite and quiet, Elam saw him differently. "People said he was a gentleman," Elam noted. "Maybe if you were a studio head or a pretty actress. But if you were just some working character guy like me, he didn't bother with you. He barely noticed you. I've got no respect for that." For a man like Elam, who was proud of being friendly to everyone from the biggest star to the stagehand, this kind of coldness was unforgivable. Perhaps most annoying to Elam was the way Cooper was praised by critics and audiences. Even when, in Elam's view, he gave lifeless performances. Elam thought Cooper's Academy Award for High Noon was one of the most undeserved in movie history. "You could have put a cigar store Indian in that role and gotten the same performance," Elam scoffed. But because it was Cooper, everybody bowed down. "I never understood it." Elam, being blunt as always, once summarized his feelings by saying, "Gary Cooper was like wallpaper. He was there. He filled the space, but you didn't notice him unless someone told you to. And yet somehow he became this giant of cinema." To me, that says more about Hollywood's obsession with looks than with talent. Despite his criticisms, Elam acknowledged that Cooper had his devoted fans and that his image as the tall, stoic cowboy was something the public wanted. But that didn't stop Elam from expressing his unhappiness. "He was the American hero, sure," Elam admitted, "but only because people wanted to believe in that image. He wasn't the best actor, not by a long shot. He wasn't even the best actor in most of his movies, but he looked the part, and that was enough for the studios." In the end, Jack Elam's dislike of Gary Cooper came from his lifelong frustration with Hollywood's tendency to praise leading men while overlooking the gritty, hard-working character actors who gave movies their soul. To Elam, Cooper symbolized that imbalance, the unfairness of a system that rewarded looks and aura over depth and hard work. And for a man like Jack Elam, who built his career on pure determination and an unshakable work ethic, that was something he could never forgive. Jack Elam was married twice, first to Jean Louise Hodgert from 1937 until her death from colon cancer on January 24, 1961. 7 months later, in August 1961, Elam married again, this time to Margaret M. Jennison. The couple stayed together for 42 years until October 20, 2003, when Jack died of congestive heart failure at their home in Ashland, Oregon.